Welcome to the Season 17 finale of XTraw AI. Over the past few months, we've explored how artificial intelligence is moving beyond experimentation and into the core of how businesses, governments, and societies operate. But today's episode is special. This is our Q1 2026 Global AI News Roundup, where we step back and look at the big signals shaping the AI landscape around the world. In just the first quarter of this year, we've seen AI agents move from research labs into real enterprise workflows. Frontier models push the boundaries of reasoning and coding. Governments treat AI as national infrastructure, and a global race for compute, chips, and data centers intensify. This quarter made one thing clear: artificial intelligence is no longer just a technology trend. It is becoming economic infrastructure, geopolitical strategy, and the operating system of modern organizations. So, in this episode, we'll walk through the 6 major forces shaping the AI landscape: applications and agents, platforms and orchestration, context, tools and data, models and compute, trust, evals and observability, and finally, the economics of AI. These are the signals that matter if you're a product leader, engineer, CIO, CTO, policymaker, or AI builder trying to understand where the world is heading. Let's dive in.
All right, welcome back to our monthly AI news roundup that we do. This time we are doing it a little differently. We wanted to kind of change our usual 4-bucket approach, and we want to expand the categories, as we know that there's a lot of agentic stuff going on out there. So we thought instead of focusing on the 4 buckets, we've expanded it into 6 different areas, applications and agents being one. The other one is platforms and orchestration, because there is a lot of AI infrastructure which is getting to standardizing a lot of things. Then we have another category which we want to look into is context, tools, and data, because this is where the theme here is more of how context is becoming an infrastructure kind of a thing. And then obviously another important bucket which we used to discuss, the models and compute, because this is where are models getting better or is compute becoming better. Then we have other category about trust, evals, and observability. This is where the governance and those aspects and ethics come into play. And finally, economics. This is where our investments and other things come into play. So we have expanded, but we want to kind of bring into these buckets. And of course, since we didn't do end of February, we thought now we are in the mid of March, we will focus on the quarter one, the Q1 of 2026. And Sesh, welcome on board. I know we are doing it again in a split kind of a recording. Lucas and Manjit are going to join in the second part of this conversation. Welcome on board, Sesh. How have you been?
All good, Raghu. Always exciting to have this discussion. It also forces us to have a perspective on things that we are reading and then have a lively conversation with you guys. So I look forward to it.
So yeah, I think when we talk about the aspect of context, right? How context is becoming more important. That is the reason if you see my the cap that I put today, it says cricket, and you might have noticed that India won the T20 World Cup cricket. So I thought I'll also bring in some kind of a context because I keep changing these different things here. So yeah, so which of these categories or which of these buckets you want to bring in?
Yeah, I think these categories are great. Sometimes they overlap a little bit. So maybe we can start on our general perspective on how I feel, like at least what the sense I'm getting on how things are uh, transitioning to less of model focus, but more of AI platforms and orchestration. And I think there are like key drivers on why this is probably happening, and we'll get into individual instances in the last month, a month and a half, on how we are seeing doubling down on investment, right? So there's a general recognition that models are commoditizing, um, models converge in capability, orchestration becomes the differentiator always, right? So that's one big driver of this change towards orchestration. And also the second thing is that while we are seeing the impact of models quite a bit, the real value is not on the consumer layer but on the enterprise layer. So enterprises need more control layers, not just raw compute and inference and responses, but they need control layers. So it requires security, governance, workflow integration. So models, raw models in general don't provide. So while models also become commodity, the model also has a limitation that they don't provide these kind of nuances that enterprises require: security, governance, workflow, and what have you, right? And also, AI agents need managements. It's almost like running dozens of AI agents without orchestration is like hiring a bunch of interns without a manager, right? So I think over the last time was very compressed nowadays. When we say it's just in a few weeks, things vastly change. So, but then the realization is the value is in delivering orchestration layer. While 2023-24 was focused on building better models, bigger models, which is still relevant. That's become a commodity, and 2025 is becoming AI apps. 2026 is tending towards building AI operating systems, right? So the best way to won't just be building smartest AI, but to build the best way to coordinate across them. And then, so coming into the actual, this is more like a summary of what the last couple of months has come back, right? Come to us, and coming to like real announcements or industry developments that is validating is that we heard just last month that OpenAI launched Frontier, the new operating systems for AI co-workers, right? So that's one classic case of why all the model providers are now focusing on orchestration engines, right? So essentially, um, Frontier became the enterprise platform to build, deploy, manage AI agents across tools and models. So companies can run agents or OpenAI or third-party providers and integrate them into enterprise systems like Stack, Salesforce, or internal or Slack, Salesforce, or internal workflows as well, right? And this, from a business standpoint, is becoming essential, essentially like a Windows for AI agents. So companies aren't just using one AI model anymore; they are coordinating fleets of them. So this is a classic case of delivering customer value with unified management of multiple AI agents, providing that enterprise identity, permissions, security, and integrating across workflow stacks, right? So that's one big um, validation of this trend, right? And the same thing we also heard about. I think mid-February, Microsoft launched AI agent framework towards into production. Again, reinforcing the same message. And what is also interesting is that NVIDIA also is moving into the same notion of building AI platforms with the Nemo Claw, right? They announced this, I think, last week or 2 weeks back. They announced Nemo Claw, which is again reinforcing the same trend that um, they don't want to be just selling the GPUs, but instead they want to be selling the brains controlling the GPU, which is where the real value and revenue is probably coming up, right? So, like few things in the last 1 month, you can see that it's moving towards more AI orchestration, then less towards model, right? That seems to be the trend of 2026. 2024 was models, and then it became app, and this 2026 seems to be more AI orchestration focused. And so I I think this is an interesting outcome, and of course there are many more. That is, there have been a few multi-agent orchestration solutions even in the past, like Crew AI, LangGraph, AutoGen, all of those things. But now with bigger providers like OpenAI, Microsoft, Nvidia, all of them itself doubling down on this
Hmm.
shows a definite trend that there's one market which is maturing, and another market which is actually where the value and the revenue is, and that's where they're focusing. So that's my quick take on the trend, and it almost. I mean, we have always heard about humans and AI working together becoming the trend. Now you have AI workforce management as a layer to support it.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, that's one big kind of learning for me in the last 2 3 months about how this is evolving. So, any thoughts on that?
Right, right. No, so I think you have hit the problem on the nail, right? I think the nail on the head. I think for the thing is like this is where exactly 2026 has opened up, right? I think uh, while we talk about the theme of how these AI infrastructure or these platforms are getting to standardize, how they are getting to standardize. Uh, Predominantly now the discussion is going here in such a way that who is going to be the winner, or should I even talk about winners and losers here, because that is where the 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 buck stops there. So is it going to be the AI company that builds the best model out there, or is it going to be the best platform builder? I think
Yeah.
from the early signs of what is happening here in 2026, it's not just that the model or the apps, but we are getting into the next layer when we talk about agentic AI. It's not even platform, right? It's more like how do we do the orchestration? How can I handle multiple agents which are not in coming in from one particular firm, but how I can handle it from different firms? How this happens? I know agentic AI. I have put some notes with me here just to get into this a bit more. Like agentic AI Foundation was formed, and now there are like quite a lot of different companies are collaborating on how to set standards, right? I think even for how these agents can interact with tools and APIs and other things. So this is one thing. And then, of course, even we keep talking about model context protocol quite a bit, but MCP is also moving towards industry standardization, right? I think through Linux Foundation governance. I think that is also one thing we
Exactly.
have noticed. Any thoughts about that before we move into another bucket or another
Yeah.
category?
Speaking of standardization and also tying into the story of orchestration, one definite trend and the validation of the trend is also what we are seeing is providers like New Relic, which was providing app observability, monitoring, performance. They are now moving into AI agent observability solutions, right? And they are using open telemetry standardized data streams to provide com- ability for companies to now monitor, build, monitor, manage agents as well, right? So this is the one thing is where things are standardization now. Then we are building orchestration around the standardization, and now you're building tooling for observability, managing, monitoring also, right? So that's definitely the directionally, it's definitely getting into more consistency and standardization. Um, this is more like the next level is of course observability, governance, think just going back to how apps are getting built, where logging, monitoring, compliance, reliability was a foundation. In terms of agent world, it's now like companies now want to track what agents are doing, what data they access, what outputs, whether the outputs are reliable, and then uh, of course the next level will be having observability first architecture, which is what the standardization and tooling will bring about. Open telemetry is one of the standards, right? So, um, so I think directionally it's going to a little bit of enterprise maturity, as well as layering on top of it is bringing AI infrastructure stack for platforms, governance, observability. So yeah, agreed. I mean, this is to your point about standardization. So that standardization is kind of evolving to the point where companies are willing to invest on offerings that are uh, building governance and observability.
Beautiful. So let's now get into another aspect. I know you've been talking about context and the tools and to some extent. I would like to touch base a bit into this aspect of how context, the new theme of how context is becoming the new context itself is becoming the infrastructure, or I would say in that way. Uh, there are even conversations where I see or hear people talking about how context engineering is becoming even more prevalent than prompt engineering. I know prompt engineering has been quite a bit there, but I think now uh, context engineering is becoming even more. So if you see, I think again I took some notes in this aspect where uh, there is this 1 million token context window, which is becoming common across all these different frontier models, right? I think whether it is for large documents or code analysis. And then about if I see how Gemini came up with this new 3.1 Pro, which is emphasizing more on this complex knowledge workflows for enterprise as well as developer platforms and all. So any thoughts about whether it is now you pick up Gemini or Anthropic? I think there is a lot more happening. The context window is becoming bigger and bigger, and then these models are able to handle much more. In the last in the last maybe 8 to 10 weeks in this quarter, what are your thoughts in the context of context and tools and data, how it is going on?
Right. In the context of context
Yeah.
engineering, I feel broadly some of the same macro forces are are kind of opening the floodgates for startups, right? So we talked about models becoming commodities.
Mhm.
Foundation models are converging, and competitive frontier is moving to data, context, and orchestration, right? That's the first topic we talked about. And the second thing is that the agents themselves required more structured knowledge. AI agents need memory, tools, context, governance, and without it, they tend to hallucinate and fail, right? And the third thing is enterprise data is today messy, right? Um, every company wants to build their own CDP platform to kind of unify, but still it is messy. They usually have 20 plus SaaS systems internally, right? Even though there are companies building it, the companies procuring it tend to always not fall into this vendor locking. So they tend to have multiple SaaS solutions internally and thousands of data sources with fragmented knowledge graph, right? So context, the context stack is very critical in those scenarios, so that um, you can evolve a new like a workable workflow orchestration solution, right? Um, so we saw, like, Cloudflare, Longchain, MCP doing the context orchestration, and then there is also companies like ArangoDB, Vast Data doing context data layer, and then there's also domain AI systems like Gong, and then finally the agent frameworks, which is Anthropic, OpenAI. They're all kind of making headway towards kind of bringing it together, right? So I definitely see context engineering, and then the directionally things converging towards leveraging that because of the whole, you know, enterprise data being messy and agents requiring more structured knowledge, driving that trend.
Beautiful, beautiful. So yeah, I know there's a lot going on with different investments also in this space. Uh, let us now get into the other aspect or other category. Do you want to get into the AI economic space, or do you want to get into the agents and uh,
Yeah, yeah.
application space? I think which one is more interesting for you?
Yeah, we can touch on both briefly, right? So in the context of AI apps and agents, like of course orchestration is one trend, but what was interesting is the announcements that happened in the last month, broadly, like the operating system race in the sense, right? Everyone wants to control where AI work happens. So uh, Microsoft Workplace OS, Anthropic Enterprise AI platform, and then Perplexity launched Computer, the model orchestration layer, right? Of
Hmm.
course, it's a pretty high price point. It's like $200 per month, but it's still. And the thing that it ties to the economic story also is, right, the margins are enormous, right? Um, so the AI agents automate the knowledge work, which is um, projected to be about like a 20 trillion dollar global labor market, right? So that's where um, it becomes interesting. Every small productivity gain translates into like trillions in terms of value,
Mhm.
and then there's also the network effects, as in like winning platforms will accumulate user workflows, data, integration, more specialized agents, and once embedded, switching becomes difficult, right? So that's the that's the big trend in terms of agent economy, from moving from chatbots to co-pilots to autonomous AI agents. Um, so the next unicorns, so to say, will not sell software; they will sell digital employees. That's like a well-known, well understood term. And towards that is where I feel this, like in the last month, I don't know, like I think end of last month or mid last month, Perplexity launched the computer, which is more like a multimodal AI agent. Uh,
Mhm.
it's like a $200 per month enterprise AI agent that at the time of launch they said they can orchestrate about 19 or 20 different AI models
Mhm.
from providers like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google to execute complex tasks. And I know this is going to increase as and when there's more adoption, right? And then the the business lens comes back to the same story of AI orchestration platform, where the value is becoming value or the revenue will come from the model router story and the digital operator instead of providing a model as such, right? Um, and what is interesting, I have not tried the computer because it's a
Mhm.
little expensive, but they do talk about deep research, getting automated, workflow execution, and integrates like the enterprise AI tools like Slack and internal apps. And the multimodal orchestration becomes very, very relevant. And if it's actually does it right without
Mhm.
hallucination, it's a classic story for becoming like a air traffic controller for uh, several enterprise productivity agents, right? So that's an interesting um, kind of app or application or AI agent story that is evolving, right? And on the same lines, we also heard about Microsoft Copilot, Co-work. I think they
Mhm.
launched and then they're launching again. Hopefully this time they get it right. Uh, and then on Anthropic, of course, launched um, cloud marketplace or I don't know what they call. They call it enterprise agent ecosystem, um, which um, it allows enterprises to deploy AI agents built by partners like Replit and GitLab and all those things. So I see there's a lot of customer value getting generated. Enterprise can deploy specialized agents for in engineering, financial research, legal analysis, design tasks. So essentially, this is again their own enterprise AI platform layer that is coming up, right? So,
Mhm.
so it's an interesting trend. And then speaking of from a economics perspective, I mean, it's interesting in terms of compute costs falling rapidly and demand explosion and platform lock-in. This is this is the big direction. And what does in the context of economics, I'm sorry, I'm wandering a little bit, is one interesting article I read earlier this month is AI computing compute becoming a form of compensation. I think this was the Business Insider article
Mm.
where they talked about Silicon Valley companies beginning to offer AI compute budgets as part of employee compensation package, along with salary and equity. So this was interesting. They did, of course, specifically talk about somebody who's joining OpenAI team asking about the AI compute uh, uh, capacity that will be allocated in terms of like a model tokens to the team so that they are able to deliver more value in a shorter time, right? So that's an interesting economic shift where AI productivity is becoming a direct economic multiplier for workers, and then that becomes a form of compensation because at the end of the day, if they're getting evaluated, they also know what the tools are needed and what is the economic multiplier that will be needed for them to deliver, right? So that's an interesting trend I didn't foresee, but seems like they are talking about it, right? So that's an interesting aspect from an economic standpoint. Um, so yeah, I think, um, and then from an AI economic standpoint, as inference prices drop, new hardware optimized inference stacks are
Right.
coming up as well, as you know, providers like Together AI, Fireworks, they're all building optimized stacks that are dramatically reducing operational costs.
Mhm.
So now with this whole notion of as they call like mixture of experts architecture,
Mhm.
where they want to uh, they want to kind of pull in the right model and agent for the right task so that you optimize um, you know
Even the task. Mm.
exactly, exactly. So that becomes that becomes a kind of a very optimization engine that is built into the orchestration layer that is being talked about. So it's an interesting. It all kind of points to the beginning of 2026 trend where AI orchestration is going to be the story this year, and then these are all like feeders into it that we are seeing.
Yeah, so that is a very interesting take. I think you've brought up, Sesh. I think, of course, I myself did not test in the first half. I think you were talking about the perplexity computer. I think which is going to be really interesting on how. So there are some of these questions coming up, like are these AI agents uh, really replacing SaaS features or even replacing human roles? I think this is
Mhm.
where perplexity computer kind of a thing, I think, addresses to some extent some of those needs, like an orchestration computer or a platform. Uh, and then the second important thing that you brought up is about the AI compute of how it is being provided or even being compensated, the AI compute. I think I'm pretty sure, I think when these kind of experiments are happening with companies like OpenAI and Anthropic, I believe in Silicon Valley, I think at least things will, I cannot imagine how the things will change, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot more that can happen on top of that. I know you are we are running short on time from your end, but glad that you are able to make it and provide your thoughts for this Q1. Any closing remarks that you would provide before and what you are looking up to before we again meet end of April?
Um, I mean, again, thanks for making time to accommodate me. I think we will see more of these things with the agent orchestration. Um, we will see. I guess in the next few months we'll start to see like smartphone AI agents for consumer AI with device level agent ecosystem, which is usually that's the direction in which industry moves, right? You start for a broad base, then you start to have personalized offerings. So smartphone personalized AI agent is what I'm hoping we will start to see very, very few, which is also pointing to like AGI stories that we talked about. We already heard about AI shopping agents, and then this with the personalization and the AGI and smartphone AI agents will probably what we'll I'm hoping to see in the speed at which things are moving. I think we'll probably talk about it next month as some real announcement is what I'm thinking.
Beautiful. Thanks for your time, Shesh.
All right. Thanks, Raghu. Bye.
All right, welcome back. Uh, this is our weekly, or I should say, the monthly AI news roundup, where we kind of discuss a few topics around around AI and agentic AI. This time, we are trying to do it like a uh, Q1 of 2026. The last time we have done is in Jan. So this time we want to focus a bit more on the overall activities in Q1. And we are trying to, I know 1 year we have done these four buckets, four categories. Now we wanted to expand a bit more because there is a lot more conversations happening, a lot more things happening in context and tools and orchestration. So we have expanded now into six categories. Obviously, one category is the economics, which is like more on investments and other things, which is still there. The other one is trust, evals, and observability, which is pretty much like our AI ethics and other things. But the other four categories, which we have kind of expanded, are like the models and compute is one. Then we have the context, tools, and data. And then we have platform and orchestration. And then obviously the most important thing is like the applications and agents, which are evolving, and we see the numbers growing like anything. So welcome on board, Lucas, and welcome on board, Manjeet. How have you been?
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I think yeah we missed connecting in February, so a lot has happened in AI age. I think if you don't, a month feel like 6 months now, to be honest. So
So where do you want to start, Manjeet? I think I know you are one of the proponents of expanding this into these categories. What is your favorite category, or what do you want to get started with?
yeah, we can start with I would say, the sort of use case and what are the applications, and then right, a bunch of things are happening. One is the continuous adoption of some of these popular tools. For example, I'm surprised to see how fast Claude Code went from 1 billion to 2 billion ARR. Feels like it was like 3 months ago they said 1 billion and now like 2 billion. I have never seen such a kind of a growth. Um, at the same time, some of the engagements on, let's say, GitHub and others is dropping, or specifically Copilot world. So, there's always kind of this shifting sentiment, shifting momentum, uh, one from one tool to another. And what if I look across last few months, looks like there is between these labs, right? Before now, Anthropic is having the full sort of attention and party in that. Before Anthropic, Google had a very good time when they launched the Gemini model. And before that, it was OpenAI. And as a result, what happened is everyone is now shrinking their release timeline. They want to release things faster than before, even the model versions. OpenAI looks like they have came to now 20 days of cadence, like every 20 days, like 3 weeks. 5.4 came up, and then um, And then when I was looking at the Claude code, I was also like, okay, what's happening with Cursor? Are people switching from, let's say, and there's another tool specifically in the coding space, but looks like Cursor is also growing. Of course, their growth has a little bit of slower than what it was. But it's not like, hey, it's the user switching from completely from one to. So what it means is kind of overall TAM is increasing. Overall number of people who are using these tools and number of people who are consuming these tokens is increasing. And as you see, all of these big players, they are taking sort of a similar strategy from like, hey, we now address this developer or coding persona. What are the other personas we can go after from the application standpoint? I think that, Cloud Cowork is one approach, and then OpenAI has more of these, different apps. We briefly chatted about, let's say, the health chat GPT, and then so I think there's different approaches, but I'm impressed by the what Anthropic is doing pretty organically, and then kind of keep every month they refresh their app, and I find it like, oh wow, things are really moving fast.
True, true.
I
I think
think it's
Anthropic is there for quite a lot of different reasons too. And I think it's very interesting. I think over to you, Lucas. I know you wanted to talk about the
no, I
application
just
and agent
wanted
space. Yeah, yeah.
No, I just wanted to say something because Manjeet said like organically, and I was like, there is nothing organic about it. This is like a full blast explosion. And interesting enough, I never used that phrase in the past,
Right.
but now it feels very sensible to use it, namely Sherlocking. Sherlocking is the description of what Apple used to do like 15 years ago whenever they like completely eradicated an app market because
Yeah.
they integrated the functionality natively into their iOS, right?
Mhm.
Whether it was like a better, I don't know, flashlight or whatnot, right? And you could, every release, every year, they Sherlocked one entire category, right? And once a year, you would like, okay, who are the poor bastards who are being Sherlock this year? And Anthropic is not doing that on a yearly cadence. They're doing it weekly now, right? It's like, and you never know what comes next, whether it's security testing for code, whether it's financial spaces, whether it's the legal profession. It's like, and it's not like one shot. It's like barrages like every other week. So I was just, I thought, obviously I agree with what Manjeet said. It's just like funny because it's such a staccato that it's hard keeping up at this point. Um, so much for that. We're still in the category context tools and data, I assume, right?
Actually, you can get into context tools, but I think I
Yeah.
thought like we want to get into the applications and agents.
Okay, okay.
But yeah.
Maybe the one thing I want to say about tools that really impressed me, and that will be a segue towards agents, which is really what I'm
Mhm.
most interested in these days, is that we see the most boring old tools that everybody knows are being reconceived for agents, like just without name dropping too many small companies. Like for instance, agent mail. Like everybody has a mail address. Everybody has like multiple mails. But I like a couple of weeks ago, I set up a mail address for my bot. It was actually quite painful. It took me a little while, right? Because the onboarding flows, nothing is like conceived or designed for an agent. It's like even
Mm,
just the first like interface, you're like, okay, what kind of name do I want? Because it doesn't really have a name. It's just my assistant. It's my bot, right?
Right.
And now we have Agent Mail, a company that just, an MCP server and API, and you can go. And the same is true now for credit cards that can be used just for agents.
Right.
And we will see this pattern for the rest of the year play out. Cue whatever tool you're using as a human
mhm.
and give it the name agentified or agent, like there was like a phase, everything needed to be like iSmart and iCar and I whatever, right? Now everything will be agent. It will be agent mail. It will be agent credit cards. It will be agent whatnot. And there will be a lot of very successful businesses that have zero inventiveness, but still be amazing, right? So that's kind of like, I think that's for me in the context and tool sections, that's interesting. Segueing into agents, because I feel like that's what we need to talk about. Like, if you're excited about AI, if you want to know what's going on, I mean, you don't have to use OpenClaw or any of that stuff, but if you don't, you don't know what's going on, right? It's like, for me, like such a big paradigm shift. And I know I sound like someone who's really drank the Kool-Aid, but I think without saying too much,
Yeah.
if you haven't used it, like it changes like how you think about interaction patterns. And if that doesn't make sense, I can give an example later on. I just want to say, like, once you're getting used to using AI in this kind of agentic loop, it's very personal and can do a lot for you. You are thinking about what the future of software will be in a very different light. And so I'm wildly excited about that. But I'm
Yeah.
talking too much, so I'm
Yeah,
heading
yeah, no, and
to
let me
Lindsay.
give another short example to I think the hammer this point home is uh, when if you're a builder, one question you should be asking is, are you building it for human and AI agent? And this is exactly Google did now. They launched their CLI to access their entire suite of the Google Workspace product. And I love their GTM message. It's pretty simple. One CLI built for human and AI agents. So, and they have thought about it because they know that both people, like we already have been accessing Google Drive and Docs and everything else, and then make it easy for AI agents as well. And I'm sure they've been thinking more kind of, okay, how we'll identify between them, how we can provide more analytics, right? And then authentications and whatnot. So definitely, I think we'll lead into another interesting thing before we jump into is, right? So this personalized open claw, I think we briefly touched on it.
Last time, yeah.
Bunch of things happened.
Mhm.
Uh, two critical acquisition. This guy who built OpenClaw, right? OpenAI kind of like, hey, why don't you come and join us? And then this week, Mark Zuckerberg went ahead and he said, hey, I'm going to acquire Moltbook, which was just like a social platform for AI agents to and I'm like, okay. And I was waiting for that somebody will acquire kind of this mold book concept, and then they still call it an acqui-hire, but I think it's the same basically, right? Okay, if there will be a millions and billions and trillion of agents, what will be this social network for them? What will be a Reddit or Facebook, or what will be the people call it this, let this baby AGIs sort of discuss and incubate and come up with new ideas. So interesting world.
Right,
For
right. I think
sure.
it started like a Reddit for
Right,
mold book or something like that. I think it can evolve into a social network even
right.
for the mold book. I think for the agents. So continuing further, I believe Lucas, I know I want to stay in this space for agentification, right? I think I know you started with the tools, with the context around the tools, and then we got into the agentification of these things, right? I think you your analogy of just like how in the past, like when Apple came up with this I thing, I everything, now it's becoming agentification of everything. So at this stage, there is this question. I know I'm putting this question to both of you. I know it's a question coming up, right? Like we've talked about it a bit back, right? Are these AI agents replacing really the SaaS features, or is it going to be something different, or
Hmm.
what exactly is happening here? Because
Yeah.
yeah,
I,
I'll
I
leave that up. Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic question. I do want to say a couple of things, just
Mm.
tagging along of what Manjit already said, just as a, because first of all, Peter Steinberger is Austrian, just like me. So there is like, I needed to drop that, like the creator of OpenClaw
Right.
had a very stellar rise. And I think Like 2 years ago, people talked about the first one person company billionaire. I'm not sure like for how much he sold OpenClaw, but it's insane to think that one person in a couple of like what 3 to 5 months built like this thing that's now like burning through like the AI infused community like a wildfire. In terms of where this is going, I think first like a very general observation. And I think it's a complete coincidence, but OpenClaw, like their mascot, is like a crab, right? Like a lobster-ish kind of thing. And what's interesting about crabs is when you look at them, they all look the same. But there's a thing that happens which is called convergent evolution. Because what happened is that multiple different species figured out that actually having like a carapace and like claws is really helpful. So there are different crabs that look the same that came from different parts of the evolutionary tree. And in a way, what we're now seeing is that this agentification is happening, whether it's in Claude, whether it's in Perplexity, whether it's in like the original OG OpenClaw and all of its offspring, right? So we see there is a convergent technological shift because people see that this kind of interaction pattern is very, very powerful. Now, you asked, like, does that spell doom for SaaS or what will change? And I think there is a couple of important things to remember. I think whenever something big happens, the markets, just as humanity in general, has a knee-jerk reaction. People go like, oh my God, everybody can vibe code an app. And now there will be this SaaS apocalypse. I think there's a big difference whether you have a tool that is, let's say, flourishes on top, right? That has an interaction level that is very much a top. Let's give you an example. Let's say speech to text software. There is amazing stuff out there. I use it every day, but you can replace it. And it doesn't matter to my value creation processes and to my like what I do. There's other tools in the stack that are way lower. And I would say whenever there is a chance of somebody going to jail or compliance being broken or you losing a lot of money, people will not have interest in going into that layer as much. They want to build on top, right? And so I think not all SaaS companies are built alike. There are some that are amazing, but on top and easily disintermediated. And then there's others that abstract away complexity that's in the world. Because honestly, you don't want to like think about like tax code changes that can happen every 2 weeks and want to keep all those records up to date. You just want to build on top, right? And so I don't think it's fair to say that all of SaaS should be treated the same way, right?
Right.
Now, that is one part. The other part is I truly believe that how we interact with software will change a lot because the interaction patterns change. One example, very, very simple, right? I told my agent, here's my flight. Please check whether the flight is delayed. Remind me that based on the traffic that I leave on time. I got out of the airplane and not that I was bored, but I had a second. So I just talked into the phone and asked like, hey, by any chance, do you know which carousel will be the one where my luggage comes out? I was like 99% sure that will not work, right? Turned out it worked perfectly. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know that like airports had APIs or whatever, right? And so I said, in the future, for all my future travel, whenever you check when I land, automatically tell me the carousel for my luggage 10 minutes after the plane landed. I don't want to go into an app of any of the like companies, whether it's United or Lufthansa or Delta, whatever. I have somebody like an agent who has context, who can help me, and I connect what I need to this context, right? And so I think how we will work, whether it's in SaaS or not, like there will be new modalities how we would want to use our software, and they're less about a CRUD like interface, like a UI,
Mm-hmm.
and more about like helping in a way to set up the hooks and the interactions that are valuable to you. So was that an answer? I'm not sure. The
Yeah,
important
yeah.
part
I
is
think you've kind of
we see a lot of change that I think is really meaningful. Sorry, back to you, Raghu.
Sure, sure. I think, yeah, you've summarized it very well. So coming to you, Manjeet, what is your take on this? I know this overall, maybe I'll put this in a different way, right? I think AI is kind of moving from assistants or to kind of more like workflow operators. So what do you see here? I think before we get into the other category about platforms and orchestration related aspects, where do you see how things are happening here?
Yeah, so I'm tracking kind of two different sort of, let's say, metric as much as I can. So, for example, how much time people are spending directly into you pick any SaaS tool, for example, right? Let's say, any CRM system, any of your productivity systems, and then so looks like the human time spent on those UI and interfaces is going down, but the overall engagement, the activities on the platform is going up. So to Lucas' point, what are those new variations of engagement layer that are going and interacting and executing the workflow autonomously or semi-autonomously, and right. So one thing that I see happening across the board is like, hey, these more and more tasks getting done through Slacks and Teams, and then because that feels like a more natural interface where people already collaborate. And if you expose these agentic actions into these places, then they don't need to go onto a tab and fill up a form, right? So that's where I would say things are. But in terms of what will be the UI, and then there's a bunch of, I would say, experiment prototype. I haven't seen anything really picked up. This whole
Mhm.
idea of like, hey, you create your UI on the fly, whatever canvas you need. I've seen some demos, but not something really production ready yet. Yeah. Quickly, let's say, for example, if I'm coming into this pod, right? Why can't my agent do the most latest research and just have a canvas for us, and then we just like, maybe questions and then some challenging assumptions and all those, and then right, not an app per se, but like just kind of build up on the fly, like how some of these tools have the capability now, writing the script on the fly and creating that, JavaScript and their that sort of UI.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm sure I think we'll be getting there pretty soon, I believe, with all these advancements happening.
but is it like, I mean, like economically make, I don't know, how much value it will add, and
How
then,
much value is
right?
that
So,
human touch is needed? I think what
yeah.
is the value that you're adding onto that?
Yeah, if something is, one assumption I challenge, if something is so repeatable that you
Mhm.
have to, do you really want to make your dynamic UI every time for that? No, it'll be waste of tokens. Why would you do that? Just have the pre-built and just use that, or uh, but I think there'll be less and less UI. That's what I'm seeing, because it's more, you pick any domain, right? That's like, hey, we said, almost one year ago that English is a new programming language. So it's not just for the programming. It's English. It's for to do the jobs in many other domains as well. So that's kind of where things will go.
So staying with you, Manjeet, I think I would like to now get into the other bucket or the other category. Which one you want to pick? I know we did platforms and orchestration is one thing we did talk quite a bit. I know there is a lot happening out there. Or do you want to get into the models and compute? I know there is always this competition about models and compute infrastructure.
Yeah, yeah. So let's touch on, I think, the three things I've been looking at, that where are the next bottlenecks, or what are
Mhm.
bottlenecks as you start to build more long running tasks, and then more, where you need larger context, more sort of the temporal memory. one thing I'm seeing is most of the new model releases that are happening, they're coming up with 1 million kind of token length.
Mhm.
And Google has been kind of leading that front from beginning, but then all the others like new Opus model, GPT 5.4 also have 1 million token length, and that's pretty useful because then you can stuff more things. If I have a big repository, if I'm a coder, I can give more context. If I need to, let's say, big book, I want to summarize, I can put in dump the entire book rather than like, hey, you can't upload. Uh, so at the same time, uh, I mean, these models keeps beating any previous benchmark. So the real question is, hey, what's the next version of benchmark? Um, One that I find really interesting as soon as this came out was GDP val, right, as a benchmark because it's just some representation of those tasks across many different jobs, domain, and more real task. Uh, so I think that'll be a good proxy as this comes in, like beyond this kind of beating a math competition and then in there. Um, yeah, and then I think the orchestration is all MCP is continue to win the real production implementations now. If you have a product and if you don't have MCP server, people, I mean, customer will laugh at you. They will say you are a legacy company. So I think that's where things are.
Beautiful, beautiful. So coming to you, Lucas, I know I would want to stay on this category models and compute. I know there is this huge, this AI arms race or whatever they call. It's now becoming pretty much very much geopolitical too, because with all this race around the models and the compute infrastructure and other things, what is your take on this and what do you see in the Q1? What happened so far in 2026?
Yeah. So I think what people underestimate is we have had a really good run after the Second World War because everybody was essentially agreeing that we should collaborate. There was high trust in institutions. And there was even in the 90s, right? Fukuyama, the end of history. Everybody will be like democratizing and trade will be free and everything. Everybody's coming together. And I think what we see is like this idea is fraying not only on the edges, there's like real like ruptures through the core of this idea. And all of a sudden, supply chain autonomy and resilience, all these topics come up. But so far, the internet is still a little bit like, let's say, insulated from that.
Mhm.
What I think when I think about like compute and what's going on is that currently the US is investing almost 700 billion, and it's not even like if you every other country in the world like telling up all the others, it wouldn't even make a dent in the like chart, right?
Right.
And for now, we think of it, well, it doesn't matter, right? Because we have like deep sea cables and like whether your ping is maybe 50 millisecond higher or lower, what if, right? But at this point, we already had the US threatening a NATO ally to take action in terms of Greenland if we're renting out our sovereignty, if agents really take up like a big piece of the GDP and really create a lot of value, you are essentially renting out your ability to be part of the workforce, right? And it's we have seen now in the Middle East with the war in Iran, you can turn off the internet for an entire country in like a couple of minutes, right? What if at some point countries decide we do not want your companies to use our data centers and whatnot? So I think for the entirety of the next couple of years, and it's not like a very fun and lighthearted conversation, but I think the reality of capabilities and where those data centers are located, not just for sovereignty in terms of like military and compliance or regulated heavy industries, Like this will be a real concern in the future. And so that's what I am thinking now as the world gets a little bit rougher, right? With wars,
Right.
with tariffs, with all of this stuff. I think like we IT people are maybe a little bit too blasé, a little bit too easy going on. This will never happen to our world. And I'm like, it could. And if your GDP is 10% agents doing stuff and those agents can be turned off in a minute, like that is not a supply chain risk. That is an existential level kind of threat that I think we could see in less than 2 years. Um, so here's maybe from like let's say like the little bit doomsday-ish kind of like perspective. One thing that I'm just generally excited about that I thought was really, really amazing. There's one company, and I'm like, I'm not even saying the name of the company because I don't want to be partial to any of those companies that created a chip where they put in the exact weights of them all into the hardware, right? So you're not just loading a model, you're etching it onto the chip, meaning you can never change the model, right? But it's very reasonable that in a couple of months from now, at some level, the chips will be good, or the models will be good enough that you will be conceivably staying with one model for a couple of years, so it doesn't bother you, right? But
Right.
what you get is a normal GPU has what, like 100 tokens per second, maybe 500 tokens per second. This beast puts out 15,000 tokens per second.
Right.
And I can't wait to have that deployed in the world because if you're vibe coding and you're in those loops where you're like saying like, hey, please change the app or do this, and it takes 30 seconds, this will then just be instantaneously. You will
Right.
be looking at a web page, you'll be talking to the computer, and whatever you're saying, it's already there. And that's I think where for a lot of, may I say, normies, for people who are maybe not plugged into the most radical advances and newest stuff, that's where I think for a lot of people it will transition from tech to magic. And I can't wait for that to be deployed on a bigger scale.
Right, right. I know you put it in in a very nice way. Coming
Yeah.
to you, Manjeet, do you want to add
Yeah.
anything here
So,
before we get
yeah,
into the other? Yeah.
and are any of you coming to NVIDIA GTC conference next week?
No, I'm not. I'm going
Yeah.
for another conference. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe a little bit of it since we're talking about any guess what will I'll make my prediction what they're likely to announce. Uh, One of them is might be surprise to people, but I think they should do it. So I think other than the kind of this continuous evolution of, maybe a new GPU hardware sort of, that kind of, their core, some more announcement in the kind of robotics, humanoid and that. But one surprising I'm expecting is because Mac Mini is selling like a hotcake
Right.
for the edge, and I'm sure Apple has been planning to double down and triple down on that. NVIDIA will come up with a lower cost because their $3,000, $4,000 is kind of still, out of reach for many. Let's say if you really think about personal AI agent, my guess is they'll come or at least announce something in less than $1,000, a version where you're like, hey, it will run these different OpenClaw, NanoClaw, NemoClaw, all these variations, and then because I think this edge compute is will be reality, and then I think Lucas, you in fact stress it to that like, hey, can I run it as my bias, right? Just like. And one thing I always like comparing these days is if you look at our human brain, right? How much low power it can run on. It's literally 12 watts
Mhm.
versus, right? And if you look at a GPU and those and how much like the power energy that they need. But as things get more compressed, more quantized, more smaller, we can run them on lower memory surface, lower power, always ready, always available. So I think I'll be interesting to see what what Mr. Jensen announced around I think this is an opportunity, and yeah, I think only two players have that sort of shared memory architecture,
Mhm.
Apple and then NVIDIA. And NVIDIA is very high cost and premium, and they have to like, okay, how can we have something less than $1,000? So let's see how
I
close I get to
I
my prediction.
I want to jump in and just say one thing. I do believe there will be a cheap market segment, but I'm also fully convinced that as soon as a company releases something, let's say between five and $15,000, right? I'm like legit money, like a car.
Right,
Right,
right.
They will sell like gangbusters. Like whoever comes up with something, let's say $8,000, but can run real legit frontier models.
right, right.
Um,
Yeah,
Well said.
they will sell like you cannot sell fast enough, at least in San Francisco and some other talk like hubs. And I think it's also important to say that NVIDIA, who is making the hardware, who probably have smart people who have done their econ classes, it's always about like commoditizing the complement, right? If you're good in A and it's connected to B, like make B extremely cheap and easy because then you're taking away the market from B and you're the winner of A, meaning hardware and models. So they're investing. They said like just recently they will invest billions in open source models. And I would be completely shocked if the open source models that NVIDIA will release, that will be maybe a little bit below the cutting frontier and the bleeding edge, will not be like completely optimized for their hardware. So what I'm pretty sure is we'll see hardware that's stupidly expensive but that will run like your own frontier model that's as good as any of the models we see, and you will never have to share your data in the cloud with anyone. And as that happens,
yeah,
man, like
We
it
get
will
into
be
the
insane run. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
we get into the insane run and we get into this hardware world of the actual bots and all, right? I think the robots and all. So I think this at this juncture, I want to get into this segue into the economics part. I know you've already talking about the AI economics to some extent. I know there's where we are moving from the monetization models. I believe. What is your take? I think you want to start, Lucas? I know you're talking about subscriptions to usage to consumption to ads and enterprise licensing. You already hinted a bit about how things will happen with what's
Yeah.
going to happen on the hardware side.
I, I've talked a lot, so we'll try to keep it brief. I saw one thing about the economics that for me embodied 2026. It said this service is free for humans and costs per agent. And that to me was just like something I saw, and I was like,
Was this an ad somewhere or is
yeah,
somebody
yeah, it
startup?
was.
Okay.
And to me, it's clear that this statement just shows how wild 2026 is. Like, obviously, seat-based pricing doesn't make sense if
Mm,
a bigger and bigger part of your industry is like run by agents. Consumption is really tough to monetize because most companies want predictability. And so you declinate like all of the go-to-market monetization models that we're used to, and you're like, this is not easy, and we haven't found like the right thing. The people who will come up with the next best monetization schemes in this world that will have a huge labor participation of AI through agents, I think they will unlock something bigger than just like a new way of asking for money because it's all about aligning the incentives correctly. That's where it will get interesting because I think monetization go to market is the unsung hero of innovation. And you need to have an this machinery of the incentive alignment and the money exchange work out for you. So in terms of AI economics, I think we will have to innovate. I've seen stuff that 2 years from now, 2 years ago wouldn't have made sense. And I think the bets are like wide open, right? Will we go back to some pricing that is like maybe anachronistic and old? Maybe. Maybe finally, like the whole blockchain technology is not just a technology in search of a solution, sorry, a solution in search of a problem. Finally, it might find its use case in agentic
Yeah.
exchanges, right? We don't know, but I'm expecting that 2026 will be a pivotal year for AI economics because that's where we will change a lot, and it will be fun to be part of it.
That's great that you brought blockchain into this topic. I think this is one thing I've been thinking quite some time about how this can be realistically a possible use case in the agentic world. So over to you, Manjeet. I think what are your thoughts on this AI economics front? I know things are going to change and things are changing rapidly.
Yeah, I think if you look at the funding, all these labs raised raised one more round and at a higher valuation, right? OpenAI raised another 100 billion. I don't know where that money is coming from, to be honest. It's like such a big, like 110 billion of like a funding round. And then, I think the valuation was some 730 or 40 billion dollar. It's crazy. Same is with Anthropic and even these other like robotics companies like Figures and others. And I'm like, how sustainable that is if it stays at $20 per license, let's say for majority of the user, more than 50, 60%. Um, what's the margin percentage in there? And so that's kind of for that bucket, for
Mhm.
these products, if you give it like, hey, anybody can sign up. For the enterprise sort of licensing and those, what I'm seeing a lot more clearly now is everything will move to consumption based for the last part, or more flex credit sort of scenario. And then you will have some way to define or identify, hey, this task is simple, complex, short running, long running, some token proxy, and that's how many credits you will reduce. So similar to kind of how cloud consumption model work. So that's where I think it's going to go, because every other model is it might work for some vertical agent companies if it's very specific, and then right, if somebody's building voice agent and you might say, hey, if my agent deflect a voice call, I'll charge you $1, otherwise it will cost you $10. But that's a very narrow scenario.
Mhm.
If you're building more horizontal agents, different research agents and others, and then it's consumption based is the way to go. Yeah, that's where things will land.
Beautiful, beautiful. So free for humans and agents have to pay. I think that is one thing which will happen eventually.
Yeah.
So I know
Yeah.
we are almost at the end of the hour. Any closing thoughts from you, Manjeet? What you are looking forward in the next month?
I think this multi-agent orchestration is where I'm spending time, and then um, we are using this term called super agent quite a lot.
Mhm.
And which where can, let's say, we become super agent as a, let's say, agentic platform provider, and where we will be a sub agent where somebody is building super agent somewhere else, where then is we serve as those requests as comes to our agents, hand off all the challenges and the issues like error compounding. If one agent make mistakes, if you have three in the line, your error will compound to kind of 2x or 3x depending on the scenario. How do you test them? How do you monitor them? How do you see like all the observability challenges and authentications? And I think it's a bit of a wild west. Uh, People have built some interesting combo using these lobsters. I think we will learn from them. these fully virtual teams, like, hey, there is a manager, there's a chief of staff, there's a researcher, and then really naming them behind there some TV shows and whatnot. But I think that'll be a good learning test bed, because it's kind of happening in a low risk environment. And then based on that, some of that will be replicated into more of the how you organize your teams of humans plus AI, and how do you do performance management for them. And one blog post I wrote 2 weeks ago that got a lot of questions back to me. And what I was asking is, hey, where is the workday, and where is the Kubernetes for agent? And the reason
Mm.
I use these two platforms is because Kubernetes Workday is from human performance management and hiring and all those, and Kubernetes for orchestration. So it's like, okay, we have those for sort of these other workload, but this new modality and then this new execution coming, who is a lot of companies and small and big, everybody's well trying to become that, but let's see.
Beautiful. Over to you, Lucas. Any closing thoughts, and what are you looking forward in the next month or so?
What I'm interested in, besides the whole like agentic and vibe coding part, is I feel like we're very, very focused on technology, and that's all fine. But I would also say that there will be a couple of surprises in the interaction pattern between agents and humans. What I like to call the human AI tango, right? And I think we're not really thinking about that right now, because the people who are using agents and the technology are comfortable with a terminal or with whatever it's currently going on, right? But I do think that there can be like really interesting new ideas how to maybe go beyond the one-on-one interaction, maybe how to bring a couple of people with a shared understanding and artifacts and AI into a space where it's not awkward because it's like one linear chat or whatnot. I don't know. Like, I would be interested not only in the technology and how it's going forward, but also like how it will be used by more people in more interesting ways that help collaboration, because ultimately that's the most fun. If you're not by yourself, but with people you like, and you build something bigger.
So I think this is where trust becomes a big factor. I know we didn't talk much about trust in today's topic, but I believe the next time we're going to talk about that. So trust becomes a big factor, right? Like how agents are hallucinating and how you humans have to trust in agents. Like what you're saying, Lucas, I think when agents are working close with humans, how would agents trust humans? And that would also
Yeah,
be a
true.
different topic. I think, yeah, so the future is exciting, I would say. So let's wait and watch. All right.
Awesome.
Wonderful chatting with you both, and looking forward for our next conversation.
All right. Thanks
Thank you.
for pulling this together. Thank you. All right.
As we wrap up this season 17 finale of XTraw AI, one thing stands out from the first quarter of 2026. Artificial intelligence has entered a new phase. The conversation is no longer just about which model is the smartest. It's about something much bigger. Who controls the compute? Who owns the data? Which platforms become the foundation for AI agents? How trust and governance evolve, and ultimately how organizations and societies adapt to a world where AI becomes part of everyday decision making. What we saw in Q1 was not just incremental progress, it was a glimpse of a future where AI systems collaborate with humans to run workflows, manage knowledge, and power entire industries. The next few quarters will likely bring even bigger shifts: new models, new infrastructure, new regulations, and entirely new ways of building software. And we'll be here to unpack it all. Thank you for being part of the XTraw AI community throughout season 17. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who's navigating the AI transformation in their organization. And stay tuned, because next week we begin season 18, where we'll continue exploring how AI is reshaping business, technology, and society. Until next time, stay curious, stay thoughtful, and keep building the future responsibly. Happy predicting the future with AI technologies, and stay XTraw